When it comes to pivotal moments in Xenoblade 2, I'm sure many scenes come to mind, such as the moment when Klaus reveals his grand design, or when Mithra awakens, or maybe even when Rex gets the third Aegis sword. However, I'm sure one of the last moments you think of as pivotal are ones that occur in the cutscenes at the beginning of Chapter 2. And yet, these cutscenes actually contain moments that, when considered as a whole, make up some of the most pivotal in the game, because not only do they showcase Rex making the most important decision in the game, but fate actually intervenes more than once without you even noticing it. And one of the reasons you probably didn't notice fate's intervention in these cutscenes is because this first cutscene actually serves as what I believe to be a distraction from it. And what's interesting is that it actually does this very naturally by also serving to set up the plot for the second chapter. Because not only are we led to believe Banna is the main villain at this point, but we are also thrown off the scent of anything other than what Banna is planning. What this does is make Rex's current goal of going to Elysium take a back seat, since he has a hurdle to overcome before getting there. It also helps to make whatever happens next not feel as heavy, especially considering we just ended the last chapter with some significant plot points. We're more or less set up for a bit of a break in these next scenes. What makes things even more interesting is that we continue to have this idea of fate's intervention be overshadowed even after it's brought up in the next cutscene titled Gramps' Fate. After Rex wakes up, he and Pyra immediately start searching for Gramps, and when they find him, it's already too late. Of course, Rex tries to find medicine to heal Gramps, but this is to no avail. After Rex says,
"I can't help it. Can I?"
Gramps responds,
"No parting is forever. We will surely meet again when the flow of the ether wills it."
And then, Gramps passes on. Hence the title of the cutscene, Gramps' Fate. Just kidding! Gramps is perfectly fine. And it's the sudden shift in tone that I feel was, once again, meant to kind of pull us back to reality so that we don't get too wrapped up in all this talk about fate and the will of the ether just yet. It's something we should be aware of, but tucked in the back of our minds for now. And I think this is even seen in the title Gramps' Fate. On the surface, it's meant to more or less misdirect the player into thinking this only means that Gramps dies because that's one definition of the word, and it's one we use often. I mean, Gramps even uses the term like this when referring to the fact that he's about to pass on by saying,
"Weep not, my boy. This is my fate."
However, the term fate can also be defined as the development of events beyond a person's control, regarded as determined by a supernatural power. So what if, just like the title of the cutscene, Gramps was also referring to fate, or the will of the ether, keeping him alive? Because while he did seem a bit confused on how he reverted to a larval state, it definitely seems like him staying alive was intentional on his part, considering he says to Rex,
"I told you not to cry, didn't I, Rex?"
and then proceeded to explain how he maximized his cellular regeneration. I think it's kind of a both-and situation here. Gramps definitely put forth his own will to stay alive, and fate, or the will of the ether, allowed the supernatural part to happen. Which begs the question, why Gramps? Because as far as we know, no other Titan can do this. So why did fate allow Gramps of all Titans to be able to Yes, I fully understand that the writers did this so Gramps could be a realistic size to travel with the party, since he's a crucial part of the story. But this is an episode of XenoSpective, and that answer's not gonna fly here. Which is why I think that Rex is the reason Gramps stayed alive, which leads me to believe he had given up hope and was probably ready to just not exist. That is, until he heard Rex. Because I think Rex is not only what gave Gramps the energy to stay alive a little longer, but also what gives him the energy and the willpower to regenerate himself. Think about it. Gramps' sole purpose, aside from guarding the way to the Spirit Crucible, which is intrinsically tied to Rex, was to look after Rex. Later in the game, when Klaus is showing everyone the fears that they harbor, Gramps talks to Rex about how he envies him for being human, for not having to exist for an eternity with no real goal or purpose. And while this isn't something that Gramps would ever say, it's definitely something he's thought about. Call me a jerk, but I don't think Gramps in his old age had any reason to hang on to life without Rex, who he may have thought died up until now. Fate, or the will of the ether, interceded here by sending Rex to Gramps to give him the will to regenerate. But things get even more interesting when you consider that something similar happens in the next cutscene to thematically connect it to the cutscene Gramps' fate. Only this time, Pyra is the one interceding on Fate's behalf thanks to a ripple in the ether, which just so happens to be the title of the cutscene. Of course, the reason this cutscene has this title is because Pyra says that phrase,
"I felt a ripple in the ether,"
which is what draws her and Rex to Nia and Dromark. But the way I translate her words, "I felt a ripple in the ether," is kind of like, "I felt a disturbance in the Force." And for those of you who aren't Star Wars fans, what this means is essentially the Force is calling to you. You see, in Star Wars, the Force acts a hell of a lot like ether in Xenoblade 2. The Jedi draw on the Force for their power, just like drivers of blades draw on ether for their power. There's also a lot of talk about the will of the Force in Star Wars, just like Gramps talks about the will of the ether. And if ether comes from the conduit, which is essentially the god of all rest, it decides fate. And if fate itself is calling to Pyra to let her know Nia is in trouble, wouldn't that mean that fate wants Nia and Dromark alive? Similar to Gramps, I believe it's possible Nia and Dromark were supposed to die here. Remember, not only were they worn down from the crash, but Nia even says that she's not going to abandon Dromark when he tells her to leave this to me. It sounds like they're dealing with a pretty powerful monster that they might not have defeated if it weren't for Rex and Pyra. So, Gramps, Nia, and Dromark were supposed to die at this point, but didn't. And do you remember who else was supposed to die but didn't literally a couple cutscenes ago? Well, I guess he technically did die, but yeah, Pyra revived him. Why? Because it was fated to happen. It's almost like a domino effect of fate correcting things. Each subsequent intercession of fate is less drastic because it's starting to balance itself back out. First, Rex straight up dies and is revived. Then, because Rex is alive, he was able to give Gramps the will to regenerate before he completely died. Then Pyra and Rex reached Nia and Dromark before they even got hurt. Now, I do want to be fair and address the fact that Nia and Dromark likely wouldn't have died here, considering Nia could have always used her true form if she needed. Unless, of course, a bunch of other Brogs started attacking at once. That would probably do them in, right? Too far? Alright, sure. Yes, Nia and Dromark probably would have been fine here, but even so, the common denominator in all of these situations where fate is interceding is Rex, and by extension, Pyra. They're the ones guided by and bringing about the will of the ether. And even if Nia and Dromark lived, they'd be joining up with Torna again without Rex and Pyra's intervention. What I'm trying to illustrate here is that Rex is essentially the chosen one, for lack of a better term. In the words of an individual on Reddit, Rex was almost bred by fate, which is not necessarily random in the world of Xenoblade 2. Of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but I think it gets my point across. I recommend reading the full Reddit thread in the link below if you're into all the philosophy behind these games. Essentially, someone or something, likely the conduit, is willing all of this to happen. It's more or less guiding the events of the game. And all of this makes Rex's decision to protect Pyra arguably the most important decision in the game, because it's literally what saves Allrest. And it's in the next cutscene that he makes this decision. After the crew sets up camp for the night and Rex explains to Nia that they're going to Elysium, everyone starts thanking each other for saving each other. Nia and Dromark thank Gramps for saving them, Gramps thanks them for saving Rex, round and round it goes. And you know, this actually brings up a good point I want to address. If fate intervenes when one person saves another, what makes these cutscenes so special? Well, the best way I can put it is that Rex and Gramps being resurrected were the first instances of when fate had to supernaturally correct an action. Remember, what set the events of the game in motion were actually Malos and Jin's plan to find the Aegis. Rex just got dragged into it, but it happened naturally. Okay, back to the cutscene. So the group's discussion eventually lands on Gramps' ability to regenerate himself. Rex, of course, starts having an attitude with Gramps for gloating about this ability, and Gramps snaps back with,
If you had listened to me and declined that reckless job to begin with, we wouldn't be in this mess.
But of course, Rex counters with,
If I hadn't taken the job, they'd have got their hands on Pyra. I couldn't let that happen. No way. They can never take her.
And while Rex does make the decision to go to Elysium and save the world before Pyra revived him, this is the moment he solidifies his decision to protect Pyra. And if you remember, it's not simply reaching Elysium that saves Aurest, because the Elysium he was searching for doesn't exist. It's actually the bond that Rex and Pyra share that gave the architect hope. And it's this hope that led him to give them one last gift that was the true Elysium that saved Aurest. While Vandam was the one who teaches Rex that he has to protect his blade by being smart with his arts later on, it's really here that Rex establishes his intention to protect Pyra, which can be seen even before he meets Vandam. After Rex delivers his line about protecting Pyra, Gramps and Nia almost look sad. And while I always used to find this odd, I think what's going on here is that they both have some idea of what Rex is getting himself into here by defying Malos. Nia's been working for them, and Gramps has literally lived through the first Aegis War. He understands what the fate of an Aegis entails. He says as much a little later in the cutscene when he's talking to Pyra, which is also where he mentions,
No matter how hard you tried, that boy would find some way to get involved.
and the reason this is so notable is because looking back on things, it's pretty clear to see that there really was no alternative to the way things happened. Rex had to be a naive child who not only believed in Elysium, but made decisions that everyone else would have considered too stupid to make, like we talked about back in episode 2 of XenoSpective. Another section from the Reddit post I brought up earlier says, Rex's absurd mentality is basically the key to the Conduit's nature, because it's basically a blind belief in possibility without being grounded in reality. While of course Aurest's savior didn't have to be Rex specifically, it did need to be someone exactly like him, and I think deep down, Gramps knows this and doesn't want to see Rex go through all that. And so while getting faked out by moments like Gramps dying and then being reborn may seem to cheapen the narrative at first, I think it's instead meant to show us that regardless of the actions others take to try to change the outcome of the story in Xenoblade 2, it simply won't work because fate will correct it. In the words of Klaus,
It is fated to happen. It cannot but happen.
and if you consider just how critical each and every party member is to Rex's quest to save the world, it makes sense why Fate would step in to save not only Rex, but members of his party. Couple that with the fact that Rex's resolve to protect Pyra here is his first real choice to form a bond with her, and without this bond, there would be no way to save Aurest. Unless of course Malos decided to stop being a dick. Hey guys, I just want to say I appreciate you all, as well as your continued patience with me. I really am wanting to try to pick up the pace with these episodes so that I'm not 80 when I'm finished, and because I know nobody wants to wait forever. As always, let me know if I missed something or if you disagree, and as always, thanks for watching till the end.